Hello everyone. I'm very happy to be here and thank you all of those who have come. We start our discussion Future of Food that is organized by Nordic Council of Ministers office in Latvia, and that's one of the activities we have in the Future Trends of Food project, something where in 2 years' time we try to look into what kind of changes are there and how the future will look like. I'm very also honored and happy to introduce you to our participants. I'm moderator Maija Kāle. Daily I work as advisor for sustainability and digitalization at the Nordic Council of Ministers office in Latvia. We have Miķelis. You can shortly introduce yourself.
Hi, my name is Miķelis. I am a researcher, senior researcher at Baltic Studies Center, which is an institute located in Latvia studying food systems.
Jesper.
Yeah, hi, I'm Jesper. I'm Danish. I'm working out here. I have a farm here in Latvia, organic farm. I'm producing organic products like beef and also crop.
And Afton is connecting to us online from Copenhagen. Afton, please introduce yourself.
Hi, my name is Afton Halloran. I'm based here in Copenhagen, as Maya's mentioned, and I am an independent consultant in sustainable food systems transitions.
Excellent, everyone is here, everything is working. Before we go ahead with our story, we would like to know your thoughts. And let's start with the Slido question. This is how you switch on to the Slido. 118, 118. It was supposed to be all 8 because we will talk about 8 future trends. But this is how you join it, and please just give some words, 3 kind of descriptions, what you think will impact your life personally in future. So, the most important trends for you personally. And meanwhile, I will ask some questions to our panelists. And first you, Miķelis. Just a question. Is there anything like extinct foods, something we used to eat but can't eat anymore? Something you remember from your childhood?
Whoa, that's a tricky question. I don't think that there's so much that these foods are extinct due to the fact that we cannot get them anymore, but the fact that they're, first of all, the supply chains we are living in currently has changed. So when I was a kid, Latvia was part of Soviet Union, so we received foods from all around Soviet Union. And now many of these dishes are just being banned because they doesn't fit the healthy regulations of European Union. And then the second thing is that quite a few of these dishes have been made by older generation living in the countryside. And with this older generation passing away, the knowledge of how to make these dishes have been passed away as well.
Yes, but can you also relate to something like that? You didn't grow up in Soviet Union, but is there also something like extinct, something you wouldn't eat anymore in Denmark or Latvia?
Yeah, probably there's something I wouldn't eat, but if I look back to the childhood, it was more natural. Everything was pure. I grew up in the countryside, and we got the milk from the neighbor farmer and so on. So basically, I see it a little bit upside down. That I grow up in a more natural and more healthy community or environment.
So interesting. I also remember the milk cans. How about you, Afton?
Yeah, I can relate to what Jesper said in some ways. So I grew up on a farm, and just having that access to fresh fruit and vegetables, growing it yourself, and then, moving to a city and not having that same access. So that's something I definitely miss and reflect on very often of, yeah, should I be in a city anymore?
Okay, thanks a lot. Let's see the result of the Slido on the screen. So this is what we see. So personally, for people here in the auditorium or also those voting online, climate change, friends, globalization, family, money, education, technology, environment. Very interesting. That's something that will impact you personally. Thank you for results. Let's go back to the presentation. And you just reflected upon your own kind of life influencing trends. How about what do you think the society will be influenced by? Again, back to Slido, 118, 118, and 3 trends for the society and the world as such. Vote again, auditorium. And meanwhile, I will ask our panelists another question before we start very serious talk. Let's try to remember what is the most funny or ridiculous future image you have come across and that in your mind will never happen. Miķelis, is it fine for you to start?
Yes, I think yes. And funny you should ask, because just a year ago I was giving a presentation during LAMPA regarding the future trends of food. So something quite similar. And one of the slides I was giving was a perspective on how the future of food will look from the 1950s. And the general idea was that all tractors were really shiny and rocket-like. And then on the other hand, you had all of the plants just were super large. So the idea of future was that everything will be large and everything will be shiny. And I think that's such a nice way to just think about the future, but it's quite clear that it's not about shininess and not about size, and we are seeing it now that we can be wrong when we try to make a picture of how the future will look like.
Jesper, please comment.
Yeah, if I can be a little bit more specific, I'm thinking more about very processed food that look like something it isn't. Actually, we also have this trend about meat that is actually not meat, and this is for me something strange, because I think we shall be honest in these things. I think things shall look like it is. We shall not pretend in our processing to make it fake, I would call it.
That's a very interesting look. Thank you. Afton, the funny future images.
Well, something that you see a lot in films and about the future is food in a pill. So meals in a pill, that you get all your nutrients just by popping one thing in your mouth on a daily basis. And whereas, so there's some people in Silicon Valley who have created kind of solutions that touch on that. I would say this, to me, is something that I really hope doesn't happen, because you remove the food culture that stands behind all these different wonderful foods that we can consume. So I would caution against a future where it's just where food is only coming in a pill form, because we'll lose so much in doing that.
Thanks. Afton, you better eat cockroaches than pills, right? Something like that. Remembering our future food hackathon that was in Riga in February. Okay, fine, we know that, and let's see the Slido results. We see our audience. Environment will be the most important and most impressive trend for the global everything. Sleep, I like that. Yes, definitely. Climate change, migration, ecology, lack of fresh water, activists, sustainability, global warming, artificial intelligence. Very nice. Thank you. You have done a great job. This is what you think the future trends are or will be. And now we will present our, thank you for the results. We will present our work, how we see or how we work with thinking about future trends of food. This is a research or a publication that is developed by Miķelis and Afton, and the methodology is based on Sitra, which is a future think tank in Finland, how we can actually think about future. It's very difficult to actually think about future. It's very difficult to write something, because maybe someone 5, 10 or 15 years later will just show it as a funny thing, right? As we just discussed, that this was funny to think that we will all just eat pills, not the food, or that the food items or vegetables will grow enormous size to feed the world or something like that. So, of course, we all have to be cautious, but Afton and Miķelis, in my mind, have done a really good work, a very important research, and we will go through these 8 future trends of food now. And I will ask Jesper, with his honest attitude, as he just showed that that's his value, to comment, does it make sense for his business? Is it something he can relate to or not? And the way we will present the trends, Miķelis will start with kind of shortly sketching what the trend is about. Afton will give more examples, how it kind of illustrates itself in society. And then Jesper will comment, does he feel this trend in his business? Are you ready? Okay, let's start. Miķeli, floor is yours.
Great, thank you. I'm a little bit stressed out because I have only 2 minutes and that seems a really short time. However, so as Maija said, we are talking about 8 trends, and this is the first one we think that will impact how the future food systems will look like. And this is how we call it, technologies will penetrate everything. And to understand what it really means, we have to take a step back and think about the most prominent technological innovations we have had in mankind's history. Things like discovery of fire, discovery of the fact that you can domesticate plants, the fact that you can use tools to actually help in your daily routine around the house. So the thing is that when you think about these technological innovations, they are not so much about wow factor. Of course, there are certain wow about them, but what's more prominent is about the impact they have had on society. For example, domestication of wildlife is the main reason why we can live in large cities, why we can store food, why we can have social organization. So so what we can learn from that is that today as well, we shouldn't so much look at the shiny wow factor in technologies, but actually regard the impacts they will have. So once we think about the technologies nowadays, what has changed is, first of all, as I said, technologies are everywhere. Secondly, they are evolving with much faster pace. And thirdly, they can adapt to particular needs. And clearly that will have an impact on production process, and we will have very innovative food products in just a couple of years. However, it's even more interestingly to assess how this will impact consumers. And a couple of lessons learned from the previous century is that if you put technology between a production and a consumer, you end up with detached consumer. If you put technology in between the processing and consumer, you end up with consumer who is losing knowledge. And if you have a consumer who is detached and losing knowledge, he's basically losing interest. So there is a possibility that by using technologies in the wrong way, we will end up with a consumer who just doesn't care. And for any change we would want to make in our food systems, we would have to think how to make consumer care again.
Excellent, thank you very much. Afton, can you illustrate this trend?
Yeah, well, I think when it comes to the different kind of solutions that we see today, we see this kind of tension between high tech and low tech. So we see solutions, high tech and low tech solutions for food waste, unhealthy diets, direct purchasing from farmers. And this is all really interesting, but what is getting the most attention from investors and in terms of financing is really the high-tech solutions like drones, for example, like sensors, AI. And you know, the interesting thing here is that if we look back historically, we do have a lot of technologies and tools at hand that can help us to address a lot of the issues that we see in the food system. For example, agroecology is a way of farming basically in relationship with nature. This is something that we have practiced for a long time, and it's something that gets, in a way, kind of pushed to the side as we move and set our sights on more high-tech solutions. So when it comes to dealing with complex issues like climate change, I believe, and there's also many other people that would say that it's going to be a combination of both high-tech and low-tech solutions, but also behavior change as well.
Thank you very much. Jesper, do you also share the sentiment that low-tech solutions are underfunded and that the high-tech solutions get too much attention and there should be a better mix of those?
Yeah, from a point of view as a farmer, organic farmer, I will say that technology is very important for us because we cannot continue globally to produce food like we do. All know that. The population in the world is increasing and we need to produce more food, but it needs to be more sustainable for the climate and everything. And in that case, I look at it in two ways. We need to go forward with technology, but we also need to look backwards, if you understand my point. So as a down on earth, down on ground, for me as a farmer, technology is very essential because I need to produce more. And still I need to look at the nature in respect. And in this topic, I can use the technology.
Thank you. I think lots of food for thought, but we have to move forward. We're limited in time, so let's go for the second trend. And Miķels will introduce this one, how food systems will be redesigned with a new set of goals.
That's agreed. So we call this mega trend food system is seeking direction. And what it means is that I imagine that it's not a surprise to anybody anymore that there are critical debates surrounding several issues associated with food systems. For example, there is this debate related to non-communicable diseases. There is a debate concerning the over-reliance of food systems on non-renewable resources. There are debates connecting food systems and biodiversity loss. So there are these huge challenges associated with food systems that we will have to resolve in the next decades. And it's not that it's completely new that we have these problems. We have been fighting them for a couple of decades now, and there has been an armies of researchers, policymakers, and even non-governmental actors trying to engage and resolve and come up with solutions. And this has resulted in some quite impressive innovations. However, even after these decades where we have, for example, 3 decades for sustainability debate, we are still having the same problems. So why is it? And there are a couple of reasons for that to my mind. First being that food systems is systems. So that means that there are a lot of actors, a lot of stakeholders who have their stakes, their money invested in the systems, and it's just difficult to make the system turn either to right or the left. Second thing is that we tend to think quite often about these problems as if they were standalone issues, but they are connected. And thirdly, because food is a complex system and it's common to all health and environmental related systems that there is this aspect of complexity, which means that we need to assess various pieces together. And despite we have been throwing resources at studying the systems, we are still very limited in our understanding how this complexity works. So, probably if we are looking at the future, we will have to resolve these issues in a complex manner. But we know that it's just probably won't be possible to resolve everything. So the future is in trade-offs, in the way how we will align commercial interest and our willingness to incentivize more responsible farming models. Our willingness to produce cheap food while also maintain healthiness. So the place where we will put the mark, how we are ready to align commercial, health, environmental interest, will be the direction where our food system will go.
Thank you for excellent summary. And Afton, can you lead us into the systemic thinking of food now?
Yeah, I mean, if we look back over the last 60 years of the evolution of food production and food consumption, we can see that the goal in the past was really about producing enough calories to feed people. And we know that that kind of paradigm or mentality is now, in a way, associated with climate change, for example. So we know that agriculture contributes 21 to 37% of the global greenhouse gas emissions. This protectionist mentality also led to a major loss of biodiversity around the world, also unhealthy diets that are, leading to illness and death in the European population and other populations around the world. So the shifting in goals that we've seen over time is now looking towards a much more systemic perspective of food systems. So understanding that it's not just about the calories, but it's also about how we produce our food. Who is producing our food? Are they farming under equitable conditions? The social aspects, but also the aspects in relation to fairness, whether you and I have the access to healthy foods in the same way that someone else who is maybe living on the poverty line has that access. So all of these different concerns are now kind of being integrated into how we structure new goals for food. And we can see that in the way, for example, the European Union is looking at food systems in the 21st century, and how they've structured a new strategy called Farm to Fork, which takes into consideration these multiple aspects in relation to the food system. So we're kind of entering a new era where we're much more open and aware to many of these challenges. And it's not going to be easy. I think that's in creating these new goals. We're also taking into consideration multiple factors and multiple different interests. That makes things one, exciting, but two, it will be challenging to come forward.
Thanks, Afton. And Jesper, continuing your story that you need to produce more as a farmer, but you also need to listen to nature. Do you think there is an option for this just transition that Afton was referring to as this EU strategy, Farm to Fork? And what would it mean, just transition?
Yeah, basically, as a farmer, I need to serve the people who want to eat. And the trends among the citizens who want to have a good and healthy food is my responsibility, is my demand, is what I need to do. So farmers in general is being led to the trends by the consumers. And of course, when we put it on a different level, also European Union standards and control and so on and so on. So for us, it's quite essential to listen the consumers, to be part of a debate like today, and also be part of the trend to make people understand what we actually are doing. If I shall put it totally down on earth, on the ground, every week we have visitors in our farm because people are interested now. They are not interested just to go to the shop and take the grain down or the oat down from the shelf, but they want to see how it's produced. Is it healthy? Is it okay? Is it without chemicals? And so on and so on.
Yeah. That's, I think, very well shows the new trend of us following in depth where the food comes from that we eat. Now the next trend, digitalization. Michele.
Yes, digitalization is omnipresent. And I think it wouldn't be right to make 8 megatrends without making at least some reference to digitalization. And so I imagine that most of you have read at least some documents saying that we are living through the 4th industrial revolution, which basically means that suddenly the digital systems we are able to connect them in system of systems, and we are even more adapted to benefit from all the data we have. And of course, this will have tremendous impact all across the social reality. However, food systems will be impacted especially for a couple of reasons, and mainly because quite a few of long-standing issues associated with food systems could be resolved with better planning and more data. For example, we know already that blockchains are used to improve traceability of precious foodstuffs. We know already that digital twinning technologies are used to basically replicate supply chains and to improve models, how they are managed. Also, we see how just the communication and the ability to store data in databases are used to close loops and to improve, to reduce food waste. So there are many of these huge promises where we see that technologies are developed. However, on the other hand, we also see that there are quite a few risky areas where we should pay close attention not to be pulled into some problems. Like, for example, we see that large agricultural companies are actually sourcing the data and trying to compete with everybody around just to get more of it and to make more informed decisions. And currently, it is not a problem, but in the close future, it might cause some competitive issues among various people engaged in agro-food systems. Also, we see that one of the unexpected side effects is that there are farmers' identity problems related to introduction of new digital technologies into farms. So it used to be that farmers were stewards of the land. Now suddenly farm management system is the steward of the land, and farmer is just a manager who is trying to secure that they will have loan from the bank. So it is quite a different perspective how a person should look at himself. So there are also, of course, we can mention the digital divide, which is, especially in a country like Latvia, where you see that there is a huge amount of small farms, and then there are very large farms that are very well technologically equipped. So these farms doesn't have the same opportunities. So in a nutshell, what we can say is that probably digitalization will improve our life to the best and will resolve at least some of the issues we are having. However, we have to be cautious because every digital technology is producing winners and losers. And if we won't keep our eyes open, probably they will push most of the society into the part of this loser side.
Thanks. Impressive, and I'm just thinking that data is the new gold also when it comes to farming, or maybe it should have a different name. Anyway, it's precious. Afton, the example of digitalization.
Yeah, I'm going to bring an example that kind of hits close to home for me. So as someone who grew up in the countryside and looking at how quickly digitalization is happening right now, I mean, my life as a child in the countryside would be very different if I was born today. So looking at how digitalization can positively decrease the distance between rural and urban areas is something I think is quite noteworthy. We see now, for example, throughout the Nordic and Baltic region, we see now that agro-tourism, different forms of food tourism are now able to reach the areas where maybe people previously were not visiting. And so we're seeing more money flowing into these areas. Of course, not enough, but it's just the beginning of what we think is a much larger trend. We can also see that artisanal food in some parts where I'm more familiar with in the Nordic region, more food artisans can actually make a living in the rural areas by selling their products, small-scale production, from an area that is not an urban area. So it enables people to actually make the choice of where they want to live, as opposed to feeling pressure to living in the urban areas where the opportunities have previously and historically been. So I think this is kind of on the positive side. We also know that small and medium-scale enterprises are able to set up shop online, and maybe they don't even exist as a physical shop itself. So that does give opportunities to some, but of course, as Mikael said, there is trade-offs here, and we do have to be conscious that there will be people that miss out. And so if we're talking about just transitions, we also need to understand who is being excluded from these digitalization processes, and also understand how we can bring them into this massive trend that we're seeing right now.
Thanks, Afton. And I have a feeling that Jesper is always ahead of the trends because he already talked about this tourism of his farm, and apparently people would find the information in Facebook or somewhere digitally. But can you comment also on the digitalization part?
Yeah, we also using it. We need to do it, and it's also very positive in many ways. But again, I cannot. I also think back, to in the past, the farmer, he was on his field or by his animal, Now he's spending a lot of time in the office because of a lot of bureaucratic system and management. And that's, in my opinion, partly negative. But on the other side, is also good because from the consumer side, they can, like we also know, they can trace us. They can see what we are doing. We have a web page where we are showing everything, and actually, when consumers come to our shop, they can see, they can trace the meat directly to our farm and so on. So from a consumer's perspective, it's more traceable and more honest, I would say.
Okay, thank you. Traceability and transparency, that will be definitely something that will pop up also later. Now about the polarized society, Miķelis.
Yeah, this is complicated to explain, but I will try. So this is something a little bit counterintuitive, and mainly because when we were promised, or decades ago, when we were discussing, or not we, but as a scientific world and just people writing books about the future, when they were discussing globalization, they said, well, everything will become unified, and you will feel the same culture everywhere. And partly this is true because you are now getting Italian pizzas in each small city that feels like it's a city. You can have sushi bars almost everywhere, or can go and eat sushi almost everywhere. You can visit Chinese restaurants, and even Eastern European shops is something common all across the Western world. So I have been in Eastern European shop in Oslo, in London, and in Copenhagen. So everywhere you have something like that. However, next to this unification, there is also what we call increasingly growing apart, or polarization. And partly this is because while we talk about globalization, we are talking about global centers. And well, if we are referring to some theoretical literatures, and Manuel Castells said it already a couple of decades ago, that only the centers feel the outcomes of globalization, where periphery remains periphery. So we see that not everybody is benefiting from globalization, and consequently a gap grows between these groups. However, there's also a second trend here, which is that openness to global and connectedness between various groups allows marginal representatives of society find people, like-minded people. And on the one hand, this is good, because suddenly you see that activists fighting for cause that is maybe marginal in their country of origin might be actually very loud somewhere else, and people just are able to connect and actually be inspired and continue their fight. But then on the other hand, you see that people who are pursuing really strange diets suddenly find people online who do the same thing, and suddenly you realize that there is a sort of normalization of strange approaches to life. So while in general we are celebrating the fact that people are being able to access these global goods almost everywhere, we are also celebrating that we are in the same way normalizing very strange things. And unfortunately, quite often this means that we are limiting our ability to change, because these strange perceptions of reality are very loud and are very eager to engage in a conversation and actually stop the initiatives for change where they are emerging.
Thank you. Quite an abstract and philosophical trend. And how about examples, Afton?
Yeah, this one's tough because it's something we feel around us. We feel these tensions. And I think the best example that we can all relate to is the tensions that we feel right now between dietary choice. So the polarization between what we decide to eat and what we don't decide to eat. So we see that the media tends to hone in to the fact that there's more people who are interested in vegan diets, but there's also a lot of people who want to continue to eat meat. What's interesting there is that, yes, this is creating a polarization in terms of our dietary behaviors, but we're forgetting what the people in the middle. So there's a lot of people who just want to, reduce the amount of meat that they want to consume and eat less but better meat, for example. And so this creates a lot of as I said, a lot of tension between how we think we should consume food. And this is really normative. So this is where all these emotions and the traditions and behavior and culture comes into play. And so when you tell people, okay, you need to shift your diet, you're not just telling them to, replace their beef for a vegetable. You're actually telling them to change their lifestyle, to change their culture, to change their traditions. And this can and does, as we can see around us, creates a lot of problems in society and where there's a lot of pushback from different consumers. So this is something that is very much emerging, but we're keeping our eyes on this because we think it's something that is will be quite defining of our times right now.
Thanks, Afton. Jesper, do you feel you live in an increasingly polarized world, and do you feel that you are part of this, in a way, war between meat eaters and vegans, or would you say that it's the between part is still stabilizing the whole system?
I'm a meat producer and I'm also a crop producer, so I'm representing both groups. So in that case, I will not say I have any issues. Of course, from time to time, we have people who is very offended about meat and so on and so on. But to eat, not to eat meat is a choice, but to eat meat, from my opinion, is an instinct. So in that topic, I just want to say let's eat more quality meat and less. And also in that topic, respect the climate and the planet.
Thank you. Because, yes, as Afton and Mitchell showed, it's not just a question about food. We go into the culture and traditions and all of this. Okay, but we have to quite hurry up as we have still some more trends. So let's move on. That the products will be valued based on the amount of waste they produce. Mitchelis?
Well, I think this is quite straightforward, and actually what you have on the screen almost is self-explanatory, but just to give a quick remark. So basically what we are saying is that people should be aware of the resources they have on their hand, and also enterprise should be very conscious of the resources they are using and actually plan how they are using it and what they are doing with it, with these resources, and what happened to these resources once they leave their hands. To rephrase, basically the world currently is becoming ever more aware that the resources we are so dependent on are infinite. And basically, if we want to continue the way we are to live in a way we are living, we have to reconsider how we use the resources that are available to us. And it might seem quite trivial in this particular region where just 3 decades ago, due to broken supply chains, we were left with quite a few resources and we had to actually reuse almost everything we had. But what 3 decades of market economy have shown is that actually once we are given opportunity to buy and to actually waste, we are quite willing to do so. And in order to overcome this dependency on resources, we have to resolve 2 basic issues. And one of them is that our economies, our economic growth is heavily dependent on non-renewables. So basically, if we want to change something, we have to detach the economic growth and non-renewables. And this is quite basic. But then the other thing, which is a little bit more complicated, is that our food system actually incentivizes throwaway culture. And the most basic example would be, well, buy more and pay less. So just throw out whatever you don't need. And again, this just means that in order to actually secure that our approach to resources is different, isn't so much about the resources themselves, but about the way how we think about resources, about discourses of how we consume things. To conclude, I'm not sure, I think I said already everything.
Yes, that's fine. Let's move to the examples. Afton?
Yeah, so we're seeing throughout the Nordic Baltic region a lot of development in terms of small-scale businesses that are moving towards more circular economy. So reaching different levels of circularity at different parts of the value chain or supply chain. So this can be about reducing nutrient loss on farms. It can also be in relation to reducing food waste. So just some examples that we're using in the report that we're developing. One is, for example, Bol, which is a Danish startup with a Lithuanian founder here in Copenhagen. And they're brewing different kinds of beverages based on unsold sourdough bread and different kinds of waste products from the food industry, and creating basically beers and beverages out of these products. Also, in Finland, there is a movement now to have more circular restaurants, circular dining, where they have zero waste concepts, which is interesting in the food service sector because they're notoriously bad in terms of food waste. So this is now something that is the beginning of a trend. And of course, there are a few people who are doing this, but circular economy will become the norm in the future. I think it's something we cannot avoid.
Thanks, Afton. Jesper, do you feel, has it become the norm or will it become the norm? Do you think about waste and how you eliminate it or make into new cycles and team up with other businesses?
I think we feel it every day, actually, from consumers' side. Our chain of consumers who is approaching us and our products, they are very aware about these things. Because food waste is unacceptable. We all know that. And our consumers who is approaching us, they have very big focus on buy less, but better. So very shortly, I feel it every day, and I feel very positive vibes about that in this area we are here.
Thank you. So, Mikkel, there is alternative.
Great.
But let's move to the next trend.
So the role of nature, one of the trends I really enjoyed writing and thinking about. And basically, I think the fruitful point to start to think about this trend is a book wrote in the 60s by Carl Polanyi. I don't know, maybe some of you have read it, The Great Transformation, which basically what it says is that with this shift, when society went from hunters, foragers to agricultural society, we witnessed a huge societal change. What happened was that there suddenly emerged a structure. Also what happened was that people suddenly shifted their relations with nature. So new institutions were introduced to basically separate a person from the nature. And this can be explained by some of the motivational theories that try to explain how people actually come up with how they will react to particular objects they are interacting with. Namely, the simplest of them says that there are two basic emotions we could have when we interact with something. It is either affection or fear. And if you feel fear, you want to control it. And if you feel affected, you want to integrate and actually live with it. And what has happened once we moved from these hunters-gatherers to agricultural society is we have been trying to basically control the nature. And this has happened with constant technological fixes. And unfortunately, what the last decades have shown us is that we are running out of technological fixes. They are just costing ever more, and we just realize that we cannot fix anything anymore. Which just means that probably the future will bring that we will shift our interpretation of nature from trying to control it to trying to live with it and be more resilient to various stresses that might come from the nature.
Thank you. And Afton, your examples here.
Yeah, so it's quite interesting to understand that distancing that we have seen in our food system, so where the consumer is very much distanced from the production of their food. And we can see some of the responses coming up in terms of how people are trying to get back into nature and interact with nature. So around this part of the world, we can see that that urban gardening is becoming much more popular, where actually you get on year-long waiting lists to just get a small piece of like a square meter of soil just to plant a few, carrots or something like that. There's a huge demand for that. We can also see that foraging, foraging for mushrooms or berries or different kind of wild herbs is also becoming a status symbol in a way that you can, it's something that is populating a lot of social media, and those who can afford the time are doing this because, one, it's because they enjoy it, it gives them pleasure, and not necessarily because they require the food from the wild environment, but it's more so that it's that reconnection with nature that is priceless. Because you could say, why should a professional who works in an office go out and foraging their own food when they can make much more money just by working in an office? But it has this kind of price tag that it doesn't have a price tag on it. Sorry, that people are willing to dedicate time towards. So I think that it's very interesting to see this trend and how it's developing. I think also that the COVID-19 pandemic has also made a lot more people think more seriously about their connection with nature. I actually know quite a few people who bought farms in this time and are moving out of the city because they want to reconnect with the natural environment.
Thanks, Afton. Jesper, you already kind of mentioned this dialogue with nature and your love for nature. So do you also see this, are you also gardening instead of sitting in your farmer's office?
Yeah, unfortunately, I don't have time for gardening at the moment, but I would love to do it again in the future. But to change this and go back to be closer to nature, there's no other way, in my opinion. We need to do it, and it will also benefit for us in all ways, personally, health, and everything. And actually, the Nordic country, including Latvia, has a fantastic opportunity in this, because we have, if we're talking about Latvia, we have a fantastic environment for growing many good and healthy things, and there's space. We have space to do it. So we have so great opportunity to benefit on this wave that is going on. So, yeah.
Thanks. I see that Mitchell also wants to say something.
No. I'm preparing for the next
because
megatrend.
we have to be quite in time. So global instability.
I think we are calling it a little bit differently, but I'm really hyped about this trend. We are calling it fear and the polarized change. And that's something that's taking place on a very personal level. And again, I would like to start with a short reference to theory and then go back to more practice-oriented explanation of what it means. And theoretical background is that some of you maybe have read the work of Ulrich Beck on risk society. And that was written some 3 decades ago when Ulrich Beck said that we are constantly being calculating our actions against the risks we as a society are exposed. And after 3 decades, we are still being exposed to risks. However, now these risks have changed and we are exposed to very real threats. And I think that's very interesting that suddenly it's not about what we fear of, but very really what can affect us. And just to give some examples of the very real threats yesterday I was walking through Central Station and there was 2 security messages in just 10 minutes, and one was saying, please don't leave your luggage because it's dangerous and we will just remove it. And the second is, please be careful, you can actually get COVID here, so please leave as soon as possible. So just in 10 minutes I was twice reminded that it's actually, there are real threats around us. What it means is that people are becoming more scared, probably they are more distanced, and because, well, it's easier not to think about these things. However, we have to keep in mind that threat and fear as a feeling is a mental state. It can be overcome, and it's not the only mental state we should take in consideration when we talk about the future of food systems. And the second is that ability to make change is also a mental state. So in order to basically make change, we have to think about the threats we are having, but we cannot think if we avoid to ignore them or decide to ignore them. So we have to actually think about mental states people are in before we can make any change.
Thanks. And when you will read the whole publication of the future trends of food, you will see that wonderful sentence, how to stay sane in this world and not lose the connectivity to reality. Afton will help us with example here.
Yeah, so one of the kind of clear examples right now is around climate anxiety and mental health. So if we all kind of think back to our childhoods, you know, what were the things that we were anxious about? For me, it was actually getting really good grades. And now when we look at high school students, when we look at young people, and also people in older generations, but when we look at these, when we look at young people, they're extremely anxious around the climate. And this is basically showing up again and again in terms of our mental health. So this is something that is driven also in fear for the future. And we can also see that when we bring it down into the food supply and just the food system to begin with, the COVID-19 pandemic, again, to use that as an example, really brought a lot of fear into many people's lives. When there were kind of initial fears around, do we have enough food supply? Are we actually going to have enough labor on the farms to harvest the food on time? Because in the case of, for example, in Finland, they weren't getting the people who usually come to do seasonal work to pick the berries. They weren't able to get them in from Southeast Asia or from other parts of the world on time. So then some berries and things were rotting in the field. So that concern over the future of our food supply is also then compounded by the fact that we're concerned over and fearful over our jobs in the future. And automation, of course, is replacing a lot of jobs in the agricultural sector and the food sector at a pretty rapid rate. So there are many things to be fearful about, but at the same time, we can't lose that control into understanding that things can be better and we can make them better.
Thanks, Afton. In Latvia, we managed our fear by buying buckwheat during COVID-19 times, as far as I remember. But Jesper, question to you. Maybe all those tourists who visit your farm, maybe they also visited due to fear because they are so anxious about their health and the best food they want to get. Do you think their attendance is fear-driven?
Yeah, due to COVID-19, we have a very different season, let's say like that. Because many, due to their fear, they don't travel abroad. So they consider to spend their summer and their holidays in Latvia. And why not visit our farm when they're on their road trip around in beautiful Latvia? So this affected us in a very positive way.
Thanks. So we have 7 minutes, and we are have reached the last trend, right?
Yes, this is the final one, which basically in our document is titled New Lifestyles. And I had a long conversation with myself how to start this trend, and I thought that the best starting claim to make is we are what we eat. And it is a phrase that is usually used to refer to healthiness of person, but then when you look at nowadays, it is very well fitted to describe lifestyle diets and lifestyle foods that people can choose in shops. So basically, to start here, a short explanation of what is a lifestyle, and it's a combination of opinions, behaviors, attitudes that are common to a particular individual, a group, or a culture. And quite often we think that these lifestyles aren't changing during time, but it's quite obvious that they are, and that they are constantly shaped by the group, by the individual, by everything surrounding us. And food industry have actually successfully managed to benefit from this idea that food can be used as a lifestyle object or an object that is enforcing particular lifestyles. So what we are saying is that there are at least 3 ways how you see food is being presented as a lifestyle, and one of them is being just by the fact that food can be produced in various shapes and colors, so they can reinforce lifestyles that you already have. Second, by diets that we have been discussing here already. And finally, through particular ideological representations you might want to illustrate to food. For example, your environmental attitudes could be expressed very clearly through the choice of particular dishes. So, once more, you are what you eat.
Thanks. Afton, your examples?
Yeah, so just quickly, because I know we're running out of time, but the example here, just kind of bringing it back to my own personal experience, is that when I was in high school, I was a vegetarian and at some point even a vegan, and I was the only kid in the school who had this kind of value system, let's say, around eating in this particular way. It was not the norm. And now when I have experiences walking into like high schools here in Denmark, and you ask the classes, okay, we're talking about food, well, who here is a vegetarian or vegan? And so many hands go up. So this has become in a millennial population, identity in relation to your diet has become a very, very interesting trend that many food retailers are keeping a very close eye on, and we can see that that also in peer groups there's even a lot of there is shaming going on around people's decisions of what they eat, and I'm sure that you have all experienced being around the dinner table with people who have very different preferences around food. So that leads to, in a way, a very individualization of how we eat. And this goes back to this sense of identity and how it can cause a lot of tensions at the dinner table, but also around us in our peer groups.
Thanks, Afton, and Jesper, your comment on that?
Yes, for sure we are what we eat. Nobody can discuss that. And in that statement, I feel benefit also for us as organic producers who pay attention to the environment, to the climate and everything, because the more focus we have on this, that you are what you eat, the more are people looking at the healthy product, the product that is grown with a touch of and look on the sustainable things and so on. So for us as organic producer, and this is the way we want it to be, because and we also see it on European level, that the growth of your organic product is increasing very much year by year. So I see a great future in this, but also the only future, to be honest.
Thank you. So we can kind of conclude that you are what you eat, and increasingly so. We still have very little time, and I would like to invite our audience to again go to Slido and list 3 things that you think will be the most urgent and with the biggest impact, again related to the food systems. Please type your answers there, and I will use the time efficiently. I will thank our panelists. Thank you so much. It was we made it, first of all, in time. We really discussed all the 8 trends, and Mitchell was saying that people will fall asleep, but I don't see there are many people who fell asleep during that. I think we gave a very condensed information in a very short time, and of course you need to think and you can iterate and give more examples about everything. But what I was particularly happy to see that this all went in line with Jesper's business, because this was the first time Jesper saw these trends, and it kind of made sense. So it means that's not something that nobody can relate to. Congratulations. Great. So we have trends from public. One of them is Afton. I think it's a compliment to you, Afton. Thank you for the good examples. And the other 2 are increasing population. So that was something, yes, the demographic issues, awareness, technology, knowledge egoism as well. And that kind of goes very well together with the last previous kind of trends that, or what we discussed, that this lifestyle, egoism, if you want to say so, or all kind of self-definition in the global space will also determine how we consume and how we relate to the food. And with this, I would like to thank all of you who listened this online, who were here in presence, and yeah, take it home, think about it, and visit NORDEN's webpage. Thanks, that's it. We don't need any more results. Thank you. Back to the presentation, please. And yeah, so this is our webpage, and this is where we will also publish the future trends of food. And of course, we welcome your comments. And if you want to ask some of the questions to us, we were allowed to stay a little bit longer. The recording is over. But if you have some questions, you can freely use the microphone and ask, or ask us personally in the lobby. We will stay a couple of minutes more. So thank you very much.